Chapter 1, Manuscript in Progress. I wasn't always a god, but I'll tell you how it happened. Chapter 1. I died, and it was fantastic. Peaceful and complete, painless and splendid. I don't know how long it lasted because time has no meaning in that place of nothingness, but it felt like hours or days passed. Others have asked me if I saw lights or had an out-of-body experience, like maybe I was floating off while looking down at my own mortal body. But that's not how it was. There was nothing, and I mean the nothing kind of nothingness, like being deep inside a cave when your torch goes out. Just blackness everywhere. Quiet oblivion. I wasn't cold or warm. In fact, I didn't feel a thing. I was just consciousness floating in a black void. But like I said, it didn't last. Next thing I knew, the pain hit me. A heartbeat ruined the peaceful nothingness, and my body screamed. Convulsions, cramping, twangs of life awakening, racking jolts of electric shocks, needles pricking my spine. I felt my innards lurching, shaking and flailing, my sides scraping across gravel, ripping at ragged flesh. I pushed off the ground, blazing air scalding open wounds. My diaphragm flexed. I needed to breathe, but nothing came. I wanted to draw air in until I could. Choking, heaving what I had, warm splashes covered my hands until I believed I'd die again. But the darkness parted. Golden rings moved across gray fog. Tears burst from my eyes and my sight returned. My hands were cooked, my stomach cracked open, my thigh bone exposed. I was a charred slab of meat, a naked husk left to rot. I thought I'd landed in the lowest levels of the underworld, deep in the pits of hell, but it was just the city of Nadur, or at least its remnants. Night had fallen, yet it was like daylight amid a raging inferno. I had seen the start of the attack, and the outcome was as expected: utter obliteration. Collapsed archways and shattered tiles, huge beams spawned fiery cyclones that tickled the sky. Grasping a falling keystone, I dragged myself upright. My goddess, Xena, was gone. Her grand palace was reduced to piles of crumbling stone and burning timber. Xena's home, my home, was demolished. I expected mounds of death, heaps of my friends and fellow townspeople dumped on a pyre, but not a bone nor a shred of cloth remained. Beyond the pitted, ruined foundation, sprawling hillsides of ancient hardwoods lay toppled. Their naked branches were like smoldering fingers, grasping for the sweet kiss of death. In my tortured, pain-ridden state, I wanted to join them. My dense, overcooked flesh was healing. I brushed crusty ashes from my limbs. The firmness was fading and my skin's mushy plasticity was returning. Screaming nerves were calming. The pain was subsiding. I rubbed soot from my arms and spotted her insignia. Xena may have died, but her mark stayed with me. The twisting, intricate patterns embedded in my forearm proved my allegiance, my unwavering, undying dedication to my goddess. Without her, I was forsaken. A heathen no other god would accept. I was convinced I'd been cursed, and I shouted, screaming profanities at the god Mathon for damning me to live. As a high priestess, the utterance of a sacrilege caught in my throat. Enraged, I roared and screamed like an undead lioness. Wiping my cheeks and catching my breath, a knocking sound, a muffled voice drew me across the wreckage of my ruined court. Hot coals crunched underfoot, singeing my skin, yet I did not waver. After several steps, my feet encountered a cool spot of bare dirt, and it caused me to pause. I stood at the center of a hollow, a circular spot where the tile had been blown apart. This was where Mathon unleashed his might, vaporizing Xena. I froze in place, taking it in. Earlier in the day, pink cherry blossoms had decorated the court's floor. They floated in through open archways, flittering, twirling flowers, decorating spring and nature's delight. It was my favorite time of year in Nadur. Tree-lined walkways decorated in lush green, sweet odors of pollen bringing forth the gift of plentiful abundance. It was a perfect forest paradise for a perfect goddess. But Mathon had vaporized everyone, and the city was ruined. Hard nubs appeared in my nail beds, growing into fingernails. No one to blame, no one to mourn, no one to remember. Hair sprouted on my head, unfurling into long black curls, and I ran my fingers across my body, caressing my smooth, blemish-free skin. The destruction was premeditated. My body was restored, yet improved, leaving old injuries behind in my former self. Mathon's visit was just a cover for an execution, a genocide, the eradication of a god. Another sound, a man's voice, came from inside Tithana's court chest. "Help! Can you hear me? Is anyone there?" The voice sounded familiar yet strained, weakened. For a moment, I felt elated that someone else had survived until I considered the predicament. The chest was the shape of an enormous rectangular bathtub, magically crafted from solid stone. It took less than a snap of Tithana's fingers to open it, but without her, I would need a team of men, hoists, and pulleys. Whoever was inside the chest had been spared the ashen fate of my brethren, yet would soon die trapped in a stone sarcophagus. "Who's in there?" "My lady." "Thank goodness, it's me, Jess. Can you get me out?" "No, I don't think I can." "My lady, Mathon stuffed me in here to be rid of me." "You must have offended him." "Yes, my lady, I but observed how the god's wardrobe may have been overcompensating for his stature. I just got the words out before he zapped me off my feet, stuffing me in here." "Ah, that Jess." It was Tithana's court jester. "You don't sound like yourself." He sounded weak and small, like he was speaking through strained vocal cords. "It's the effect of Mathon's spell, but I assure you, it's me, our divine mistress's truthsayer. Can you get me out of here?" I had no relationship with Jess, but he was the only other survivor. We had a common bond, a lifetime of servitude to our goddess. "Are you still there?" "Yes, I'm just considering the situation. I'm alone, there's no one else." A weak whisper of a voice came through the lid's gap. "Oh!" I could hear the desperation in his voice, and I wasn't sure what to do next. Every bit of wood was either on fire or smoldering. All the armor and weapons had been melted into shiny blobs. There was nothing solid to pry with. "I'm going to die in here, aren't I?" "Death isn't so bad, you know." It sounded more appealing with every passing moment. In a desperate plea, Jess moaned, "Please, try something. Anything." The fires were subsiding, and darkness was encroaching. I worked by the orange glow of millions of embers pulsing in the breeze. I grasped a head-sized stone from a piece of fallen archway. I believed it was solid, but it felt lightweight, like it was hollow. Smashing the stone into the edge of the chest's lid, I chipped away a walnut-sized piece. Encouraged, I grabbed another stone, lifting it with both hands, yet it also felt lightweight. Raising it overhead, I leaped into the air, soaring higher than I'd ever jumped before. As I descended, I thrust the stone toward the chest, cracking the lid, leaving a wide gap. My feet crunched down into a smoldering log. "Perfect! I'm going to crawl through the gap. This is great!" After a pause, he continued, "I knew something was happening, but why did Mathon do this?" I was so distracted, I ignored Jess's remarks. Cracking the chest open was the first physical feat I'd completed since my resurrection. In the fire of my rebirth, I'd become leaner and stronger. Moving my arms and legs, toned muscles rippled beneath thin skin. The huge stone I lifted wasn't hollow, and I wasn't weak. The jump I took while carrying such a load would have been near impossible for the largest strong man, but I did it with my slender feminine frame. I wanted a mirror to ensure I didn't have the face of a demon. I knew I wasn't a god, but whatever I had become, I wasn't normal anymore. I was damned to live, to endure the endless pain of life without a god, without friends, without hope. I was convinced that was my curse. In the dim light, Jess cooed, "Oh wow, you're naked. I shall avert my eyes." "Don't bother. There's no one left to care." I'd been so busy looking at the change in my arms and legs and the ripples in my stomach that I hadn't noticed the thin black cat pacing atop the chest's cracked lid. He was a scrawny little thing and seemed more like a long, emaciated kitten than a full-grown cat. Well, then I'll just do my best not to stare. It took me a moment to realize the voice was coming from the cat. "Since you're looking, please tell me I'm not a hideous demon." "Yeah, no, you look amazing." "Mathon turned you into a cat?" I asked, noticing that Jess was indeed staring at me, scanning my figure with his bright yellow eyes. "Well, it's not the first time I've been transfigured. At least you can understand me. Every other time, people just tell me to stop mewing. So far, only the gods have been able to understand me when I'm like this. Tithana always thought it was funny, and she'd have a good laugh before changing me back." I turned away from Jess and muttered to myself, "Well, shit. Now I'm talking to cats." Could be worse, you know. You could be dead. Being dead was better than this. I began to leave and Jess leaped from the chest, following me across the glowing coals. "We need to go in case Mathon returns, and I need clothes." Jess howled in pain, sounding very cat-like. "Wait, help! I can't walk across this." Leaving Jess To fend for himself was beginning to sound appealing. I thought he'd be helpful before discovering he was a cat. Among the priestesses, cats were believed to be troublesome halflings whose souls were trapped between the living and the dead. But I reconsidered because he was human and merely in the form of a cat. I grabbed his torso and tucked him under my arm. If you put me on your shoulders, you'll have both hands free, but carrying me like this will probably slow you down. Fine, I said, grabbing Jess's legs, wrapping his abdomen around my neck, wearing him like a fluffy black neck warmer. He almost felt like clothing. Cursed or not, the fires were dying, and the chilly night air was moving in. I don't know how you're walking on those coals. I'm cursed. My burns are healing between steps. That doesn't sound like a curse to me. I turned to look at Jess's whiskered face. Being torn from the peace of death and returning to this hellscape doesn't seem like a curse. Jess rolled onto his chest, pulling away from my neck, cooling my skin. But if Mathon killed everyone, where are the bodies? Ashes. He vaporized them. Lila's gone. I hope it was painless. Who is Lila? My girlfriend. But if I'm stuck as a cat, it wouldn't have worked anyway. But she didn't deserve to die. All my girls in the priesthood are gone too, and I'll never see Taryn again. She was my best friend, always had a stupid joke to share. She was such a great dancer. My emotions were frayed and numb from the shock of losing Tithana and my sisters in the priesthood. Taryn would have handled this better. She was the brave one of us. I heard Jess sniffle, and his voice changed, going lower into a whisper, like he was sharing a secret. I heard it happen from inside the chest. Mathon and Tithana were arguing. He wanted to take something from her. She accused him of being mad, saying he'd lost his mind, that the gods had formed a pact, and he was breaking the covenant. Mathon laughed, and Tithana screamed. There was a flash of light so bright it shone through the chest's stone. I hadn't even had time to think it through. Everything was fuzzy. I was trying to recall what happened as I talked. I was just outside the court when it started. Tithana told us to leave, but I backtracked and peeked through a gap in the doors. Mathon's hands were raised toward Tithana, and she had a bright white spot glowing in the middle of her chest. She made eye contact with me and flung a hand in my direction. Mathon screamed at her to stop, and that's the last thing I remember. I heard that too. Afterward, there were more flashes. The ground shook, and I heard screaming for what seemed like ages. Then everything went silent until I heard you. So he did it then. Mathon killed Tithana. And Lila, all your priestesses, and everyone else. Mathon should die for this, I muttered. The uttering of another sacrilege against the gods caused a well of guilt to boil up in my throat. I pushed it down and held my tongue, hoping Jess hadn't heard me. Neither of us spoke again. It felt like we were in shock as I walked away from the palace, crossing the remains of Nadur.